Hello everyone, welcome back to another Spring Boot J2EE lesson. Today I'm going to teach you about the Jstl SQL tags. The Jstl SQL tags provide SQL support. The URL for the SQL tags is http://sun.com java JSP Jstl SQL, and prefix we can give as SQL or any other prefix. The SQL Tag Library allows the tag to interact with RDBMS's relational databases such as Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, or Oracle. The syntax used for including Jstl tag libraries in JSP is lesser than, percentage simple, at, and taglib keyword, and the URI http://javasun.com JSP Jstl SQL, and we can give any prefix. I'll give SQL for these examples. Now first thing, we'll learn about the JSQL SQL database data source tag. This tag is used for creating a simple data source suitable only for prototyping. It is used to create the data source variable directly from JSP, and it is stored inside a scope variable. It can be used as input for another database action. So first thing, I'll go to my C drive, program files, and MySQL, and go to MySQL server and go to bin file, and here let's go to cm. We'll create a command prompt here, and we'll say MySQL -u root -p. So here we have to provide the password for MySQL. I'll provide my password. Actually, I don't have a password right now, so I provide space and press enter. And now I'm in the MySQL query library. Okay, so let's have an example for this exercise. We'll have SQL data source tag placed, and let's see what happens when we run it. We'll provide our taglib URI http://javasun.com JSP Jstl core tags as prefix C, and javasun.com JSP Jstl SQL tags as prefix SQL, and inside here, inside the body, we'll declare this. We declare SQL set data source var_db, and we'll provide the driver as com.mysql jdbc driver. We'll be using MySQL for this example. So here the URL will be jdbc://mysql://localhost, and we'll provide database as test. There will be a database called test here inside our MySQL database. The user will be root, and the password is blank, so I provide blank for it. Let's now run this and check what happens. We'll go to localhost 8080, and we got an error. This happened because what we'll do is, for this error, we have to have an import of the MySQL connector Java file, jar. So here in the project structure, let's go to libraries and press the plus button, and from Maven, and here let's type MySQL : MySQL -connector -java and the version, and let's press on OK. and let's press on OK again, and let's apply and press OK again. So now the error has gone. So that means MySQL is working perfectly inside our application. Okay, so here let's learn the next SQL query. We'll learn about the JSQL SQL query tag. The SQL query tag is used for executing the SQL query defined in SQL attribute or the body. It is used to execute an SQL select statement and saves the result in scope variable. Let's see an example for this. Alright, here in the command prompt in the MySQL command prompt, we'll use our test database. We'll say use test and semicolon and press enter, and next we'll say we'll copy this from here. We say create table students ID in not null, first name varchar 255, last name varchar 255, and age int not null, and we'll have this code to create a new table called students with the ID, first name, last name, and age like this. We'll paste this here and press enter, and our new table students got created. Next thing, let's insert some values. We'll insert a new value called with ID 150, name Kulesh, last name Abhyasundar, and age 22. We'll paste it here and press enter. Likewise, we'll do this 3 more times. We'll have another one name ID 151, name Milind, last name Pereira, and age 20. After that, let's have another one, Rambo Rajkumar, as age 24. Okay, and finally another one called Harry Potter, age 22. Alright, next we'll have an example for the query tags. We'll copy this example from here. This is actually a table. We'll copy this from here and we'll paste it here. So what is done here is you set the data source for var_db driver .mysql jdbc driver and URL jdbc mysql localhost test user root and password space. Here after that we have declared SQL query for data source db with the data source db and the variable rs, and we've said select all from students. And the next thing, inside the table I have created a tr tag with student ID, first name, last name, and age. And the next thing, I've used the code tag for each for what with the variable table, and the items is given as rs.rows. And in the next tr, I have created td tags that has the table ID, first name, table.id, table.first name, table.last name, and table.age. And finally I have closed the code tag for each tag like this. Let's run this and check what happens. Let's check what output we get from this code. Let's refresh the page and see what happens. We get our values just like that. We get our student ID, first name, last name, and ages. Kulesh Abhyasundara, 22 aged. Milinda Pereira, 20, Rambo Rajkumar, 24 aged. Harry Potter, age 22. Okay, that's something, isn't it, guys? Now let's go to the next tag. we'll go to the SQL Update Tag. The SQL Update Tag is used for executing the SQL DML query defined in its SQL attribute or in the tag body. It may be SQL update, insert or delete statements. So what we'll do is, we'll copy this, we'll be using SQL update data source called DB, where the variable is count, and we'll be inserting new student values 154 Robin with the last name Hood and the age 25. For that I'll copy this example from here, copy this, and I'll remove the previous code and paste this here. Here what we have done is we've created the data source again called vardb and driver com.mysql.jdbc.driver and URL jdbc-mysql://localhost and the test database, and finally the user with the root password with nothing. And next thing I insert the update query, SQL update query with the data source of the DB and with the variable name count. Inside this I have inserted into student values ID 154 and name Robin and last name Hood and age 25. And next thing I declare the query data source and write the var rs and select all from students, and I've made a table with table headers like student ID, first name, last name and age. And finally I will use the core tag for each with the variable table, and I declare the items as r.rows, rs.rows, and in the next tr tag in the table data I have pasted table ID, first name, last name and age. Let's check this. Let's run this and check. We'll get a new record after 153 if we run this. Let's run this and wait till it gets built. Alright, when we refresh this, we'll get 154. We'll get 154 Robin Hood, age 25. Let's refresh this. We get Robin Hood 25 just like that. Alrighty. Let's go to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are gonna learn about the Param tag, SQL Param tag. The SQL Param tag sets the parameter value in SQL statement. It is used as nested for SQL update and SQL query. So the param tag sets the parameter value in SQL statement. It is used as nested tag for update and SQL query. To provide the value in SQL parameter, if null value is provided, the value is set as SQL null for value attribute. Alright, now let's see this in action. We'll copy this example from here and we'll paste it in the body of the new index.jsp. Here what I've done is I made a data source called vardb and driver com.mysql.jdbc.driver and URL jdbc://localhost and the test database with the user, root and password nothing. Next I set up student ID with the value 152, and the next thing I have updated the data source with the var count and delete from students where ID ? This will delete our SQL param value student ID which is 152. This will delete Rambo Rajkumar from the database. So the param value Rambo Rajkumar will be deleted, and the next thing I have declared a query data source with the db var rs and selected all from the students. And the next thing, I have declared a table with the tr and th values, student ID, first name, last name and age. And finally, I declared a for each tag with the var table at items as rs.rows, and I put the tr tag with the table data, table.id, table.first name, table.last name and table.age, like this. Okay, let's run this and check what happens. What happens is 152 will be removed. Let's check it out. Yes, that's what happened. 152 was deleted from our database. So here this deleted 152 from the database. Now what we'll do is we'll have another 152 value inserted. So for that we'll use this insert code. We'll copy this from here and we'll remove this and paste it here. Here we say 152, insert into students values 152, and name will be Jackie Chan, and age will be 19. Let's run this and check it out. Alright, a new value got added, 152, Jackie Chan, age 19. So that's how we insert and delete items from our database using the SQL tags. Okay, let's go to the next example. We'll declare SQL date param tag. The SQL date param is used to set the specified date for SQL query parameter. It is used as nested for SQL update and SQL query. To provide the date and time value for SQL query parameter, if null value is provided, the value is set as SQL null. Now what we'll do is we'll create a new table inside the test folder, test database. Here we'll clear here. What we'll do is we'll use test like this. Let's remove it and we'll type cmd again, and here we say mysql -u root -p, and we don't need to provide a password because there isn't one, so we'll press on enter. Next thing here we'll say use test, and the database changed. And now let's create another table called student, this time without a s. It will have int id, which is not null, first name varchar 255 and last name varchar 255, and the date of day d or b. Let's have this inside the code. Let's press on enter and query got OK. So that means the database has been created. Now let's insert some values. First I'll insert a value called ID 150 Kulesh Abhay Sundara with the year of birth 1994 7/19, and let's have it inside here. And we'll do another value Rambo Rajkumar 1992 3/9, and the next thing we'll have 152 Harry Potter 1992 1/23 of birth, and finally we'll have student and finally we'll have Mary Jane 153 ID, year of birth 1992 1/9, and press enter. Okay, so 4 records were added. Now what we'll do is we'll have an example for this. We'll copy this from here. We'll copy this from here up to here and copy this, and we'll remove the old SQL statement and have a new one. Here what we've done is we've created data source DB and driver com.mysql.jdbc.driver and URL jdbc /localhost/localhost/test, and user will be root and password will be null. And we'll declare date here inside the sql tag. The date will be 2010-16 and the student ID will be 155. So 151 will be Rambo Rajkumar. And I've updated the data source with the var count, update student set DOB and where ID, and with the date param DOB and param value student ID. And the next thing, I declare the query data source as DB and var rs select all from student. And I've created a table with the border to with 100%, and I've created a tr tag with table headers and emp id, first name, last name and DOB. The next thing, I for each of the table with rs.rows as items, and inside the tr I've declared td tags, table id, table.first name, table.last name and table.dob. Let's run this and see the output. Let's run this and we see our values. This time we have emp id, first name, last name and DOB. The first names are Kulesh, Rambo, Harry and Mary. And the emp IDs are 150, 151, 152 and 153. And last names are Abhayasundar, Rajkumar, Potter and Jain. And DOBs are here likewise. So we made a new database called student and declared. What we've done is we've changed the database date of birth values like this. Okay. Now let's go to the next lesson. We'll learn the transaction tag. The SQL transaction tag is used for transaction management. It is used to group multiple updates into common transactions. If you group multiple SQL queries in a single transaction, database is hit only once. It is used for ensuring that the database modifications are performed by the nested actions, which can be either rollback or committed. So here we'll use the transaction tag. We'll copy this example. We'll copy this example from here, the final example, and paste it in the body of our index.jsp. So okay, here we set the data source DB driver com.mysql.jdbc.driver and URL jdbc mysql /localhost test and user root and password nothing. And I've declared the date DOB as 2010-16 and in student ID will be 151, and I've declared transaction SQL tag with the data source DB and updated the var count, update student set first name equals Khalil, ID is 150. So 150 Kulesh, the first name will be changed to Khalil, and the next thing I updated with the var count, updated student, then set the last name of the ID 152 to Sheriff, 153 to Sheriff. So here the last name Jane of Mary will be turned to Sheriff. And after that I updated the count and insert into student values another value 154 Sam Jones 1995 10/6, and I finally close the transaction After that, I will declare the query data source DB and varrs and selected over from student. And I've created a table with tr values, emp id, first name, last name, and dob. And I for which the table with the rs.rows and declare table.id, table.firstname, table.last name, and table.dob like this. Let's see this in action. What will happen when we do this? There won't be any errors. There will be a change in the database or the tables. Let's refresh this. And we see the change. Kulesh got turned to Kalle and Mary Jane's last name was turned to Sheriff. And we added another row, 154, Sam Jones, with the date of birth 1995, 10/6. Alright, now till here we've learned about the SQL tags in JSTL, and I hope you learned a valuable lesson from this example, and I'll see you in another JSTL tag lesson another day. Until then, bye guys.